All right, everyone, welcome back to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We are making a journey through different curricular options that students might encounter in their high schools, talking about college level courses within the high school. So, in the last segment, we spoke about the International Baccalaureate, the IB program. Now we're going to turn our attention to the Advanced Placement or the AP program. And joining us to unpack exactly what the AP has to offer, we've got Michael Yager. Michael, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hi, Ian. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So your background is both in admissions and as a college counselor. Where you worked as a college counselor, what curriculum did your students have access to?
Yeah. It's great you brought up IB. I did work. My first school was an international baccalaureate school. We had actually transitioned from an AP curriculum into the IB as a full diploma program institution. And then when I moved to Texas, the school that I was at was fully up and running with an AP curriculum with lots of options for students.
And AP is tends to be more common in the US, right? I mean, it's one that IB is growing in some ways, but it started internationally and has been fairly small relative to the AP program when we talk about schools around the country.
Yeah, I think AP is the one that most families are probably familiar with. If you talk to students, especially at this time of year, a lot of kids are taking a deep breath because they just finished APs. Some of them are already, done with senior year, done with whatever school year they're on, and then they've moved on. Others are just finishing up the last couple of weeks. But yeah, AP is definitely more popular in the US, more widely known. And I think maybe one of the reasons is because of the kind of a la carte nature of APs. So you have usually lots of different choices depending on the school, how many AP courses are available. And so if you're a student who loves the STEM fields, you can take your AP calculus and AP physics, but maybe you're in college prep for Spanish or English or whatever courses give you more of a hard time, more of a challenge.
That's right. And it should be stated here that there isn't some element of the AP program that's going to encourage students to take those AP level classes in those other areas. It really is a la carte in that students can say, I want to opt for this challenging AP class and that one, but I'm not going to do it in this other space. That's not really available to students that are involved in the full IB diploma program. They're going to be taking those challenging classes all the way across the board. So I think some folks like that element of choice from the AP program, but I think it also avoids the difficulty of taking college level courses in areas that are maybe not a key strength for a
Yeah.
student. I think it also raises a question that we get quite often, and we get this from families of, eighth graders, ninth graders. They'll ask, how many AP classes should I take? And that's not a question we ever get around the IB because the IB diploma is essentially fixed. It's 6 classes plus the additional requirements Christine laid out in the last segment. So, how do you answer that question when people are asking about numbers of APs and when they should start taking them?
Yeah, I always turn it back to the school system. And usually students are recommended for AP courses from a teacher, from a counselor. There's some level of you had to have an A in the course prior, like an honors English course if you're going to be recommended for AP Lang or AP Lit for English. So to some extent, the school is going to have some input. There might be, size restrictions on the class where they can only fit a certain number of kids.
Yeah,
I always tell families if your student is thinking about and they think they can accept the challenge of an AP and you haven't been recommended to always advocate for that because I think students can rise to that challenge in a lot of cases. But when you're talking about the larger basket, like how many APs do I need to get into Harvard, that type of question,
yeah,
there really there really isn't a satisfying answer because even within your own school system, if you don't have the blinders on, you can look around and some kid has more always, right? And so I think that's the challenge with AP is kind of, and for some families, just getting out of their own head and understanding, my student might not be able to take 6 APs, and that's okay. They're still going to be a competitive applicant. They're still going to be able to go to college, but maybe they can take APs here. Maybe they can take college prep or honors courses in other subject areas. So they have that overall balance. So I think the balance part is left up to the student and the family and
right.
the school with APs, whereas the IB just throws it all right at them.
That's right. And there are pros and cons with that, right? Like the
Yep.
idea that I can just sign up for the IB and I'm essentially choosing which higher levels I want, but I've got this all inclusive experience is very different from having to be responsible for making that choice. And that's one of the things that I think we see cause a lot of stress for families is, well, it's great to have this choice, but I don't know what decisions I should make. I don't know how this is going to impact my student later on down the road. When does this IB kind of opportunity start for students? When, I think we do get eighth graders that are asking about AP courses. We want to think about preparation, but where do we tend to see students start to encounter the IB or the AP program?
As early as ninth grade for some students. I mean, like a world history AP course, we offered to students in ninth grade at the schools that I was associated with. I think a lot of kids more common, like 10th grade might be the first time they dip their toes in with
Yeah.
one or two, and that's pretty responsible, I think, from an educator standpoint. Junior and senior year, if you have a kid that's more advanced, they might be taking 3, 4, 5 APs or more, depending on what they've proven so far in grades 9 and 10. A lot of schools, kids would be taking honors level courses in ninth grade if they're advanced, and then they would naturally kind of move up in 10th grade and then APs in 11th and 12th. But yeah, there's no kind of set number. So, and
No.
if you have a kid that's coming into ninth grade already advanced, maybe in math or in world language, they might be starting out with more than one AP just because they've had that advanced coursework. And so, yeah, it's you get a little bit of everything with the AP.
It's tough. I think that you can hear that and say, oh man, we got to get our students started early, especially if we're feeling competitive. But one of the key things that I heard from you, even around ninth grade APs, was we offered this at our school. And that's a really important point for families to absorb is a lot of schools don't offer APs at the ninth grade level. Some don't even offer that 10th grade AP in, let's say, world history, which I think is probably the most common 10th grade AP class. And so students are often doing honors classes to get ready for that AP. And you talked about moving up, right? Like so an increase in rigor as students move from, say, college prep to honors to AP level classes. What what do you see as the key differences in expectations from, let's say, an honors English class to an AP English class the following year?
AP is always going to be a jump from an honors curriculum because a lot of the AP curriculum is designed for the test, and so teachers are going to be trying to cram everything that they know could potentially be covered on that exam so they can best benefit their students, which means they have a lot that they have to get in there. Usually with an honors curriculum, because you're not teaching to the test, you have a little bit more flexibility, and therefore you might be able to push deadlines back or move topics around. Whereas the AP is, it's geared towards that test. Teachers are often evaluated on that test. Schools are often evaluated on those exam scores from APs when you have outside community members looking in to see the performance of the school or teacher. And so there can be a lot of pressure to make sure that you're covering a massive amount of content. And that's where I think understanding that it is a big jump from honors to AP, especially for 10th graders that might be thinking, I'm going to take APs for the first time. A lot of schools will put a cap on it and say, we're only going to let kids take 2 APs to start, and I think that's a great idea to just make sure it tamps down some of the excitement that kids have, if they are ready to roll and they want to take 5 APs. It's like, okay, let's get a taste first before we dive all in.
And you're pointing to the fact that AP classes, they're going to feel really different depending on what the content of that class is. A math class is going to be different from an English class, of course, but there's some similarity in terms of that workload, in terms of that push, because both types of classes are being taught to that exam. There are those deadlines that need to be met. And so you could extrapolate from an AP World History class what the rigor of an AP chemistry class might feel like, even though the content is wildly different and your ability to manage that content might be different. It's a similar level of expectation. One of the things we didn't fully address in the last segment with Christine was thinking a little bit about the role with college credit for the IB program. And I know that for the AP, it feels like it's an even bigger part of the conversation. I think that's because of the way that the AP leads into these exams that students take. As you said, end of year, students are starting to finish this up. I think it's also because the AP is managed by the College Board, which is an organization that, of course, owns the SAT and has a big role in testing. So, what is the relationship between the class and the test, both for an admission office who's reviewing a student and then also for a registrar's office that's evaluating credit for the college level work.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot with, AP exams can be helpful in a bunch of different ways. AP exam scores, it can validate what you've done throughout the school year. So if you're a student who has, an A record and you get a 4 or 5 on that AP, great. It kind of helps stand up those grades.
Yeah.
It can also be if you've really struggled in school and you end up with a 5 on that AP, something that you can represent in your application process. I know the content, maybe I struggled with a, teacher conflict, or the class was early in the morning, or whatever it is that, the reason why the grade wasn't there, but obviously the content knowledge might be there.
Yeah.
So I think some of those things can be helpful for students when they're representing AP scores on their college application. They have a little bit of freedom of choice too. So they can pick and choose if they have 5 APs that they can put the ones that they scored 4s and 5s on their application and send it out the door. So they have a little bit more of that autonomy as far as sending scores out. Um, with the IB, the thing that's a challenge there is that colleges don't see those IB exam scores in the application process, because kids take those exams
Right.
essentially after senior year, and they can still be used for, college credit, just like the AP scores are, but they kind of miss out on that application phase, which for some kids might be beneficial.
And when we talk about an AP class or an AP score, excuse me, of 3, 4, or 5, sometimes just 4 and 5, those will typically qualify for college credit. IB, usually it's 5, 6s, and 7s. And we can draw a pretty clear comparison between those benchmarks. It's not harder to get college credit through an AP exam, for example, than it is through an IB exam in most cases. Does that tend to be true given your experience with the curricula?
Yeah, I think, as far as like what colleges take and how easy it is to transfer those credits, it really just depends on the kind of the schools on the student's list. So the more selective the school, the less likely it is that they're going to take AP credit at all, or maybe they're only going to take 5s, or so they're going to put more restrictions on the exam score itself. And so I think for students who are out there taking APs with the mindset of I want to get the most credits possible, having a good understanding going in that that's not going to be the most selective schools. That if your goal is to get through college and get an undergraduate degree in 3 years, or accelerate your process, then you should be targeting the types of schools that are going to take those AP exam scores that are in that 3 range, that are in that 4 range, that give you more credits walking in the front door, allow you to get out and start your professional career a little bit earlier.
Which, as you say, is not everywhere and is not going to typically be schools that some of these more competitive applicants who have lots of AP classes are going to be looking at. And it's something I think we'll talk in the last segment with Zaragoza about how that college credit works within the credit transfer process. But one of the feelings that I get is that this idea of college credit is really attractive to high school students and their parents when they're looking at taking a class or an exam, but that sometimes that promise is overstated in some ways, that it doesn't really benefit the students in the way that students are envisioning that it will. Is that does that resonate with the experience that you saw sometimes with students that you were working with at the high school level and how they were thinking about the college credit they were earning through their advanced classes?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I think some students think like it's going to make life a lot easier if I can knock out some of these APs, or maybe I can, get through college a semester earlier. It really depends on your goal. But in a lot of cases, if you're just taking a handful of AP credits, it might make your college process a little bit easier. It may allow you to have a little bit more flexibility on coursework. It may still, you may still graduate in 4 years, but it may be that you're taking 4 classes a semester instead of 5.
Right.
So there's a lot of different, I think, expectations that families have going in with AP, that really looking at the important thing to do would be look at the type of institution that you feel like your student is targeting. So if they're targeting highly selective schools, how do they handle APs? If they're targeting, community college or other schools that are lesser selective, like great, let's see what the policy is there, and then we can kind of look in the middle of the road to see what we might be bringing in, what's a priority, what do we want to do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Just projecting a little further on down the road what it might look like. I remember a friend in college who came in with I think 8 AP credits, and what that allowed him to do was he could take one fewer class each of the semesters of college. So instead of having to take four classes, he just took three. And read, four classes is a lot. Three is a standard level curriculum. So it helped him to meet the benchmark that he needed to graduate. For me, I was just like every semester, I want to take as many classes as I can. I'd take 10 if I could. They're so fascinating. So, also understanding who you are as a learner and how much you want to engage with college classes, because the reality is whether you're taking three classes or four, you're still paying the same tuition.
Right.
At least as far as how Reed did the work when I was a student there, or charged the bill. So, is it going to save you money? Does it get you out of an extra semester? Will it save you a year of study? It's going to depend a lot on the institution you go to and how those credits are going to transfer. I'll ask you the tough question that I asked Christine, just because I want to be fair to her, because it was hard. Let's say you go out on the road and you're interviewing students and you meet somebody that you really like. Great conversation. You're looking forward to seeing their application come across your desk. Are you hoping that they have an IB curriculum, an AP curriculum, or a dual credit program? What's going to give you the greatest opportunity as an admission officer to advocate for that student?
I mean, the natural answer is it depends, but if I'm going to be put on the spot, which I should be, I think that for ease of a read, the IB program, it just automatically checks the box, highest rigor, boom. And you don't have to go digging through as a reader and see like what was the student's core curriculum grade 9 through 12? What did they accomplish? With the IB, I also know that they've been engaged in an extended essay, so they've had a lengthier research project that's been mentored. I know that they have those CAS hours, the creativity, activity, and service. I know they put a bunch of hours into their community. I know all that stuff right off the bat. I don't have to go thumbing through the application. So knowing what readers are up against these days in terms of application volume, I'm just going to opt for the easy route and go with that answer.
It's amazing you say easy, because that is exactly the word that Christine used and that we talked about in the review, is that, especially these new admission officers being trained, it's just IB is easy. It's like, all right, you got the diploma, boom, like on to the next thing. And there is some subtlety with AP in unpacking what those opportunities look like. I think that can also be an opportunity for a student that puts together a really cool curriculum based on what is available to them at their high school. But it's a little bit more of a challenge. The onus, as we discussed, is more on the family to make sure that works.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, awesome. Well, we're gonna say goodbye to you and welcome Zaragoza for the next segment to talk a little bit about the dual credit options at local community colleges. It'll be very interesting to see what his perspective is. But I want to thank you for coming on the show, and so far that's 2 votes for IB. Christine said whatever curriculum is best for the student, which I thought was
Exactly. That's the right answer.
that's the right answer. Yeah. But thanks a lot for showing up. I appreciate you,
Yeah.
Michael.
Thanks, Ian.
All right, we'll be right back, folks. Don't go away.